welcome y'all. This is episode 15 of Collapse Talk, and this is your host, Gabriel. I'm glad that you're tuning in again and just checking in or, just listening to what I have to say about this madness that we're in, this mad world. But yeah, I mean, from my end, things have been quiet. Living in Texas, though, there's been interesting events in Texas as a whole, but for me, things have been quiet and easygoing. But really just worldwide, depending on where you're at, either things are easygoing and returning to normal in some way, or they're getting worse. So we'll talk about that. We'll expand on that. So this is, with this show, we're going to divide into 3 segments. So we have the international segment, domestic, and then natural. So internationally, apart from Brazil, the United States, and Russia, the rest of the world is doing all right with this outbreak. Of course, what I mean to say really is that most of the developed world, if you're somewhere more remote, then that might be a different story. But generally speaking, right now, the outbreak is stagnating apart from specific geographic locations. The global outbreak stands at 10 million. And the recovered rate is 5 million, with deaths at 515,000 or 515,000. So, yeah, United States, Brazil, and Russia are the top 3 there in terms of infections, and it's still accelerating. It's still here. It's still, I don't know what else to say. And because of that, places like Russia and Brazil and the United States, they're being barred from entering the EU. The Union has been recovering, unless, specific places. But as a whole, the Union has been doing okay. But of course, they don't want to take that risk and allow mainly Americans, but Brazilians and Russians into their country and risk infection because, we just mismanaged it. So that's that. The outbreak, the coronavirus outbreak is just, I don't know if it's here to stay, but we're already at 10 million and the year hasn't finished up. So it's really interesting. And, at the same time, we're lucky that this isn't as deadly as, say like the contagion disease or something like Ebola or something like that. It's not. It's deadly, of course. It is deadly. I'm not saying that it isn't, but it's not as severe. But it's still not something that you want to get. And I think that's something that has to be reiterated. Like, okay, this probably won't kill you, but it's still going to mess you up. So you still don't want this. So there's that. But coronavirus outbreaks are spreading, particularly remote areas. And in Brazil, it's been showing that the outbreak has been affecting the native populations. And I have mentioned this before, but I just wanted to read something. So this is reading from livescience.com. Brazil has the second largest outbreak in the world and has reported nearly 1 million cases of COVID-19 and more than 47,000 related deaths, according to the Johns Hopkins virus dashboard. But while the mortality rate is about 6.4% among the Brazilian population, that number rises to 12.6% among indigenous populations, according to CNN. By the end of May, there were more than 980 coronavirus cases and 125 COVID-19 related deaths in Brazil's indigenous populations, according to numbers from the advocacy group Articulation of the Indigenous Peoples of Brazil, CNN reported. So, yeah, that these tribes have been isolated, right? And most of them have been discovered, or I shouldn't say most of them, but there's a good portion that had first contact within the last couple of decades, since the 80s. There's some tribes that they didn't know about. There's still tribes in there that haven't been contacted. That's how remote this region is. So, this disease is going to spread into those areas, and those people haven't built up an immunity in terms of viral outbreaks. So they, this is really going to mess them up. it's sad because you're losing culture essentially. It's a genocide, and in some ways it's unintentional, or at least this is being portrayed as being unintentional. But you still have the Brazilian government under the rule of Jair Bolsonaro, or is it Jair? I don't know. I need to clarify that. But Bolsonaro, who is a right-wing fascist. I mean, he's just plain and simply a fascist. He's not necessarily any good for Brazil or those indigenous people. And it's very clear by his demeanor and his policies. I mean, they were basically in denial. Him and his administration were in denial over the Amazon being burnt to the ground. And those conditions are still going to persist. I mean, we very well may experience in another Amazon fire later this year with the heat and dryness of the region. So it's really going to be, the Amazon is really, it's going to be a test of just our ability to heal the planet and also, take care of disaffected communities or communities that are in the way, or not necessarily in the way. They're at risk. They're more likely to experience a cataclysm, environmentally and just health wise. So I mean that's what happens, right? These groups, these people, they're the first to get hit because they're closer to nature. So they don't live in this artificial environment, being cities, urban environments, so they can live off the land. But then when the land starts dying, well, then that clearly reflects in the people's health and their way of life and their health and their happiness, just all sorts of things, really. That's probably why our industrial society experiences such a mental health crisis, because we've detached ourselves from nature, essentially. And unless people have a purpose, I mean, it could be anything, just chasing money or building up something. Unless they have a purpose, they're aimless, and they experience depression or other mental illnesses. So it's really going to be interesting to see what happens with these Amazon natives, because I mean, we're witnessing a genocide. It's not like camps or anything like that, but this is the Brazilian government isn't going to do much to help these people, because they know, oh, well, we could just let them die off and then we can take their land. That's basically what it is. And it may not even be intentional from the government's part, but there are illegal loggers and just all sorts of people that go into those areas that, openly kill natives. Like, they kill the chiefs and environmental activists. Like, there's so many stories of activists or indigenous leaders being murdered by these loggers or just these bandits, essentially. I think of it like as the Wild West almost, and that's really what this area is. It's like one of the last like true wild areas in the planet, where there's like, okay, there's a border, so this area belongs to a country, but there's really no civilization here, so you're on your own, really. So that's really what is happening there. But yeah, the Amazon, we're just keeping a close eye on that. Maybe there's some fires still burning there, I don't know, but I feel like, well, then again, I should say that they're below the equator, so they're not experiencing their summer. I mean, they're not experiencing that heat as I was thinking before. But eventually there's going to be an uptick in the Amazon fires, and it's just going to happen again. Besides, those fires, it had to deal with the heat, it did, but it had to deal also with activities such as agricultural activity or slash and burning. I mean, a lot of these parts of the region are being cleared out to make room for ranches. Brazil is a big exporter of beef and meat, so like it's one of the main areas where land is being used for. So yeah, I mean, again, human activity, greed, all sorts of things. So that is the gist of the international coronavirus outbreak, and it's still underway, apart from like Brazil, Russia, and the United States, and maybe some other smaller places. Everybody else is doing fine. I did mention about New Zealand, like they had like they were just in the clear, and then they had some tourists that came in and they were COVID confirmed, so they didn't hold that record for long. But still, like, it's a small island, and so they can, for the most part, quarantine pretty easily. And who knows? Maybe the infections are spreading there. Probably not, because they can mitigate it. It's not like the United States where people are complaining over masks. Like, come on, man. It's so childish. This country is so childish. But at this rate, you just got to be concerned about your own survival, and you just got to watch everybody else burn themselves down. So that's the name of the game, right? So yeah, coronavirus outbreak. Americans are banned from traveling into Europe, essentially. Who knows how long that's going to last, but it's just like, it really shows that people are not going to let Americans in now. And if things continue to deteriorate in this country, they're not going to even allow Americans to claim like refugee status. Like, it's going to be a bitter taste of medicine where we're going to have Americans leaving their country only to realize that nobody wants them. So, not to say that we deserve it, because nobody deserves that treatment, but it's just like, it's a very sick sense of irony in some way. It is ironic, because we're always preventing people from coming into this country. Well, nobody's going to want us anymore. So there's that. So moving onward, another development internationally has been the protests, anti-racism protests that have escalated. Well, I mean, it was in response to the murder of George Floyd, and they have escalated worldwide. It's primarily in countries such as France or the UK, where there is a multi-ethnic population, and it's turning into a political movement. It's turning into an international movement. In some ways, it's being co-opted because it's anti-racism, but then you also have people talking about capitalism, and you have people talking about, it's, they see people out in the streets, and then somebody's like, here's my chance to talk about something, and then they go out with the megaphone, start talking, and then they grab people's attention, and so it builds from there. So, we had the George Floyd murder, I should say, and it was terrible and wrong, like that was murder, and then we had the protests as a result, and which turned into an uprising almost, and now it's quieted down, and there's still protests happening. There's probably still some rioting or looting, who knows, but it's not at the level as it was before, but it's just interesting how we live in such a connected world where somebody watches a video of a man being murdered by police in Minneapolis, and somebody in France looks at it, and they might not even understand English, but they understand what's happening, what they're seeing, and they see the exact same thing happening in their streets. So that is going to inspire them, and then they see, oh look, Americans are out in the streets, they're taking their country back, or whatever they would think. Well, not even that, it's just like they're just burning shit. But the idea of just, you see the murder, and then you see the response to it, and you think to yourself, well, we can do the exact same thing, or we should do the exact same thing, because we're experiencing the same oppression and tyranny. So yeah, in France, it is, or I should say Paris, Paris in France, it's multicultural in some sense. The French, not that I know anything about France, I don't know anything about France, but just from what I've seen, it's just they're very proud of their lineage, I guess, their culture and their language, which is okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. And it is also interesting because France has been historically a pretty integrated society. Like, there's so many different, I mean, not to say that racism doesn't exist in there, but, historically, considering, the United States, how it's treated people, in the past, minorities, and you look at places like France and you're like, wow, this is very progressive. But, for the times, it's still, there's still racism there. Like it just happens. So the police there, or I should say, the perception or the portrayal of police in France is very similar to that of the United States, of just being like meatheads and just force all the time. I mean, when you look at videos of these French police officers, it's like almost identical. Like they just harass people and beat them up, and they do target suburban areas in Paris that are minority primarily, or immigrant communities. And I mean, we see it all the time. There's plenty of videos you can look up of French police officers, just harassing and beating up people. So it's very real. And they had the yellow vest protests, so cops are on edge. And also there was a time where like the cops and firefighters were fighting each other. So it's still like, it's very much a city or a country on edge in France. I mean, this is the home of the French Revolution. So when people go out in the streets, they're out there. Yeah. So right now, of course, we have the yellow vest protests that are merging in with the Black Lives Matters protests, and we're just seeing what you saw in the United States happen in France. So reading from Al Jazeera, riot police fired tear gas to prevent thousands of anti-racism protesters marching through central Paris on Saturday as a wave of anger continued to sweep the world following the death of African-American George Floyd in the United States. The protesters gathered in Place de la République, where the crowds chanted "No justice, no peace," and some climbed the statues of Marianne, who personifies the French Republic. Police refused organizers' permission to proceed to the Opera House. So they did have protests, and it eventually did, it was peaceful at first, but then it grew into some skirmishes, and so of course they rioted there. And now what's happening, as I've said before, police brutality and possible racism does exist within the French police force. So now they're seeing images of George Floyd, and now they're talking about their own people being killed. So there is a man who was killed. His name is Adama I don't know how to say that, Traore. I apologize, but Adama, who was killed in 2016 in a similar situation where 3 police officers held him down, and his body weight their body weight essentially asphyxiated him and killed him. And then on the official police report, it's unclear how he died. So it's very obvious, the parallels, but this was in 2016. So now people are on the streets and they're demanding justice over the same thing. And there are more people who are coming out now about their family members being murdered by the police, and people wanting justice, people wanting to take it back. I mean, what else can you do with that? People, they feel helpless, and this is the state. This is not some random street thug. I mean, there isn't any difference, but the difference is that it's the state. How are you gonna you can't hit back at a police officer, because then you're hitting back at the entire government, and nobody can tolerate that. Like, they're not gonna tolerate that. Not that I'm saying you should fight back. It's just it's just the principle of the matter, And here in France, and people are just they had enough, same as here, and they're experiencing a coronavirus outbreak, a economic slump. This is nothing new. Again, the Yellow Vest protests were a response to gas prices. They were getting taxed on gas prices, so it was almost like, I think at some point, like $7 a gallon or something. It was some ridiculous number. Like it was like, yeah, even here people would riot over that. So this is nothing new, and this is just it's just building up and building up. It's kind of like a snowball. You have one thing but then it rolls and rolls and rolls, and then, hey, there's more adding on to it. So, who knows? But, in this case, this is anti-racism. This is police brutality. So this is what is happening in France. And, we have similar events in UK. They were breaking down statues, and there was a picture of a right-wing activist that was attacked, and then one of the protesters in the crowd stood up for him, and he basically had to get other protesters to help him because this mob was essentially going to kill his man. So he had to take him to the police and get him help. But it was a very compelling image about just basic humanity and empathy. If I saw, if I was out protesting and then I saw a racist, just yelling back at us, I would just ignore him. Just ignore him or her, them. Just ignore them, because they want you to hit them. They want that. They want to confirm, these people are I understand now when people are talking about just nonviolence, because part of it, you can feel like, okay, I'm, standing up and I'm hitting back, but there's also a selfish desire to it. There's also I'm hitting this person, or punching them, fucking them up, It's a selfish thing. So I think that's what most people are trying to steer away from, because you could use violence in the name of something greater than yourself, but ultimately you're using an act of violence for your own selfish desire because you want to inflict harm and pain. It's another thing when you're responding to, to defend yourself. That's another thing. But when you're actively punching people because you don't agree with them, or they said something you don't like, well, then that's a selfish thing. I don't know. I don't like hurting people. I don't like hurting anybody. So there's just the idea of punching a racist is, I see, oh, you should punch Nazis, but my first thought is but why? Because then I'm the instigator of the violence. Even though his ideology condones genocide, he's not actively doing anything to threaten me. He's just there. Oh well. Not to go on a tangent like that. But yeah, we're just seeing this international movement grow, and it's turning into an anti-racist, movement, which is always good. You always want that. But I don't feel that racism is as it was before. Not to say it's not real. Not to say that I haven't experienced it. It's just, people are afraid right now. People are scared, so they're afraid of their own shadow. They're just that. That's essentially what I think is happening. They're just looking for anything that might suggest something that might be amiss. We had the Bubba Wallace incident that occurred in NASCAR. And, NASCAR, of course, is stepping up now. So they banned the Confederate flag from their events, which hey, I honestly don't care if you have a Confederate flag and if you fly it, because it lets me know exactly where you stand. Okay, you're for the Confederacy. All right. And, it's their property. So, I mean, what? I don't, I'm just not going to go there. I just wouldn't visit. I don't have to deal with that. But then you have also NASCAR saying that they want to ban any display of the Confederacy, which they have every right to do that. That's their property. All these people talking about property rights. Well, hey, NASCAR owns the racetrack. That's their racetrack. So if they say they don't want that flag there, you can't bring it. It's not violating your rights. That's just they just don't want that. That's them, using their rights. If that makes sense. It's just a lot of people that are, again, snowflakes. There's snowflakes on both sides, really, but there's just people that they can't believe. Oh my God! How? What I meant to say with the Bubba Wallace incident is that because a lot of people are afraid right now. And what happened with Bubba Wallace is that they discovered a noose, or supposedly a noose, in his garage, and and he didn't discover it. So I guess somebody discovered it, found it, and told him, and then blew it from there. And it was also really promising because there was a walkout. People were walking behind and supporting Bubba Wallace, which is good. That's a good thing to see. Well, because it was revealed later that it was a pull rope. Now, I saw the image of the pull rope, and it did look like a noose. So, yeah, I mean, if you see that just hanging there, okay, that's weird. Unless, if it actually served a functional purpose, which was pulling the garage. Okay. It looks like a noose. It's all about context, right? So you can have a noose, right? But then, is it a lynching statement, or is it just we're gonna hang you, or is this it's different. There's different context to it. But of course, in the context in Bubba Wallace, or as he thought, it was a noose threatening a lynching. And if you're the only black guy in NASCAR, that's just in the back of your head. I don't want to assume that there are racists in here, but this is still NASCAR. But then again, they've decided to ban the Confederate flag, so they're stepping up now. They're they see where the wind is blowing, so they're not going to stand up with that. But people are just upset at that. And look, man, it's NASCAR, okay? This isn't a hate rally. This is just cars just driving by, and I'm sure there's some folks in there that don't even care about the Confederacy. They just want to see cars. Okay, well, why do we need any political flag here? Who knows? A lot of those people, they have nothing better to do anyway, so NASCAR is just their outlet to have excitement, and drink. And some of these states, they don't even have football. They don't have any, they may have college football, but apart from that, they got NASCAR. So that's what they're living by. So next we have a development that occurred that could have escalated into something worse, and still could. It's still an ongoing development. So in the Himalayas, between China and India, they share a border, and it's a hotly contested region. It's actually neighboring the Kashmir region, so it's part of that area. It's the Kashmir region being disputed between Pakistan and India. Well, then on the other side of that region, they have Ladakh, which is a region that is contested between China and India. And it's really it's like a tri-state area of nuclear escalation. You have 3 nuclear powers that all hate each other, for lack of a better term. And it continues to escalate. So over, the last couple of weeks, around June 16th, I should say, a incident occurred where 20 Indian soldiers were killed in a clash between Chinese forces in the area. So, what happened? It just kind of blew up. And it occurred in what's called the Galwan Valley. So there's Ladakh, and then the Galwan Valley, and then there's a Chinese administered area, which is Aksai Chin. And so there's just debated regions of where the border lies. Okay, Chinese can be here, Indians can be here. There's just no agreement, really. They can't agree on it. And of course, China, they want to take more than what they have. And not to say that India is innocent, but at the same time, you have China right next to you that's trying to slowly, push the goalpost. Hey, nobody's stopping us. Okay, well, this is ours now. That's basically what it is. And what is mainly the resource in that area, that's what all these conflicts are over, is usually resources. It's fresh water. So the Himalayas, they're home to glaciers, and those glaciers, they melt and they feed the river systems in India and in China, for most of Asia, really. Like a lot of these river systems, they originate in the Himalayas. So yeah, they're posturing and attempting to seize more control of that region. Particularly, now we have climate change that's occurring, so those glaciers are slowly receding, and those people aren't going to get as much water as before. So that's going to be like one of the main areas of a water war, nuclear water war. It's really going to be interesting to see what unfolds. But again, it's a remote area. It's mountainous, so it's hard to get to. And, it's constantly, I wouldn't say shifting, but like there's features that change. So, I mean, there's some rivers, and there's glaciers, portions of a mountain could literally collapse and there's going to be rock slides. So it's a lot that can change. And so in that sense, it's really hard to tell what part of the region is yours. So yeah, so they just come in odds with each other, Indians and Chinese soldiers. And, they've had one war in the 60s, I believe. And in that time, India lost. But apart from that, in the last 45 years, no soldiers have been killed in that area. And in this incident, it happened. Somebody, or I wouldn't say somebody, but there was there were soldiers that got killed. But in a weird twist of fate, it wasn't any gunshots. It wasn't like a firefight that occurred. So they always have these scuffles where they're just fighting each other, fist fights and just kicking each other, throwing rocks. So it's like, this is a schoolyard fight over freshwater resources between two nuclear powers. Yeah. I mean, like, we have enough to worry about here, and now we have to worry about these guys. Like, come on, really? Because if a nuclear war happens there, like, it doesn't even have to affect the whole planet, or it will affect the whole planet, but it doesn't have to be like nuclear strikes everywhere. Just in this localized region, a small nuclear war could easily blot out the sun and set in motion a mass extinction event. Like, that's how severe these weapons are, and that's how severe this situation is. Because not that it would happen anytime soon, but it's slowly building up. And so what they're saying is that there was a dispute, a clash, where 3 of their soldiers were killed, and then eventually the Indian government released also that 17 more soldiers were killed through their injuries. So in the total, it was 20. And we don't necessarily know from the Chinese end how many were killed there. I've read somewhere about like maybe 40. So they took more losses possibly. But it was, from the reports, they're harrowing, because what they're saying is that like there was a point where the soldiers were either retreating or something happened where they fell down a ravine, and so they were seriously injured because they were falling down the side of a mountain into this riverbed, and then the Chinese soldiers went down into that bed and started bludgeoning them. So that's why most of those soldiers were killed, because they were basically beaten to death after the fact of an injury. So, but again, that's the speculation there, and the speculation is that they used rocks and they used clubs, wrapping them in wire, like a scene out of Anchorman, where they're fighting there. No touching of the hair or face, or I mean, I don't know if those rules applied, but it was just reading this, I'm just like, wow, this is really like they're literally devolving in terms of warfare, because like we're just resorting back to sticks and stones, and which makes me think now, like I this will be a cool premise for a movie where like our weapons are so destructive where we can't risk using them, so we have to revert back to medieval warfare to get anything done, because our modern weapons are just gonna destroy everything. But again, those type of things escalate, so it wouldn't necessarily hold up in the end. But it's just like, wow, 2 nuclear powers fighting each other with rocks and sticks in the middle of nowhere. Or for them, it wasn't the middle of nowhere. It's it's a deeply important water resource area. But it really just shows the human nature and our capacity just to fight over anything is, oh well. But it's going to be interesting how things have unfolded now. And this was like a couple weeks ago, possibly 2 weeks ago. I'm recording this on July 1st. So right now things are, it hasn't really moved from there. I think both sides don't want a confrontation with each other, but at the same time they're not backing down. So you have Narendra Modi and then Xi Jinping. So these are both strong men, right-wing guys. So they're all about strength, and it's who knows? Who knows? Because these guys, they're usually the type that aren't going to back down, and they're usually the types that whip up their nation into some kind of confrontation. Because again, these countries are also experiencing COVID outbreaks, and they're also experiencing economic downturns. So they need a distraction, and this is the perfect one. And both sides in this case are just gonna basically fuck it up. I mean, it's just, I don't know. So again, there's protests against China and in India, and then if there possibly are anti-Indian protests in China, who knows? They're certainly trying to push, the Indians are trying to push to boycott Chinese products. They're starting to boycott Chinese apps, which everybody should like. I don't understand why TikTok is still a thing. Like, I tell people all the time, like, you are surrendering your data to the Chinese government, and they're just blank, just like, what? Huh? It's just blank. And they keep bringing up the point, well, I mean, Facebook isn't any different. I'm just like, I mean, you're not wrong, but Mark Zuckerberg isn't like affiliated with the American government. He's just an American, and of course he reports to them, but he's not like actually part of the American government. So, all these companies like Alibaba, they are an arm of the Chinese government, and they use those companies to spy and steal intellectual property, like they do. That's what they do. That's not me being speculative. That's just what they do. So, India is starting to take a stand against China, and maybe this will help us in the end of checking China, because India has a population of 1 billion. I wouldn't say that they're on the same technological level. Well, I mean, not that I wouldn't. They're just not. They're not at the same level. But those numbers alone, and also the fact that they're a nuclear power, might be enough to check China. And in the event of a conflict, they're going to have to deal with Indians, like Indian army, military trying to, subvert them. And then you also have other smaller nations, so Taiwan, the Philippines, Vietnam. Who knows who else will step to the plate to take on China? But if India's on our side, then that's a really good thing. But then again, I don't like thinking about the prospect of a global war with China, because that would just be nuclear holocaust, or who knows. I did read that they're slowly starting to create nuclear weapons that don't release as much radiation. So instead of some nuclear fallout, or I shouldn't say some nuclear fallout, there's going to be fallout, but not the level as before. So if they can create a weapon where the fallout footprint is smaller, where it'll just blow away, I don't know how else it would go, but it would be interesting to see how a nuclear war would unfold then, because that's the main reason of a nuclear holocaust, is the radiation, because you have the bomb strike and it's going to burn everything in sight, but then you have the radiation that's left over, and that's what kills people. So if they can reduce that footprint, who knows? I mean, in some ways, that's like a sigh of relief, like, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to have a fourth arm, but at the same time, like, oh shit, that means that they're going to use those weapons more? Or what? I mean, that's still terrifying. Like, those weapons are terrible. Like, I don't know. Nuclear weapons they're cool to look at, the explosions, and I like the concept of the weapon, but humanity would have been better off without it. But at the same time, if we never invented those weapons, then shortly after World War II, we would have had like World War III, like maybe 10 years later. So you gotta take what you can get. So that's what's happening in China and India. And it's still something to keep an eye on, something to closely monitor. But we're just going to have to see. We're really going to have to see. So, speaking of China, because China is a great conversation starter. So, and specifically of Hong Kong. Hong Kong has been, or at least for me, a hot spot just paying attention to, because they're just slowly starting to lose their control and power. And as it stands, the new national security laws that China has adopted are now being implemented in Hong Kong. So it's really going to be telling what happens, because now they can like arrest people for terrorism charges and such, like, and you know, this whole movement started because of an extradition bill that they wanted, and now they're getting more. They're getting more. The mainland Chinese government. It's just really bad. This is really bad what's happening in Hong Kong. It's chilling, really. It's really chilling. Because what can also happen, well, the main thing is that, and this has to do with not just the Chinese government, just these bureaucrats and these lawmakers in general. What they do is that they make it so vague that it can mean anything. It's up to them. The definition is up to them. So there are multiple articles, and you know, I'm reading this from BBC, right? So just to name a few, right? So there's a couple articles that are, wow, it's funny. So Article 41, trials can be held in secret. 46, and without a jury, Article 46. Judges can be handpicked, Article 44, by Hong Kong's chief executive, who is answerable directly to Beijing. The law also reverses a presumption that suspects will be granted bail, Article 42. Continuing, entire cases from investigation to judgment to punishment can simply be handed over to the mainland authorities, Article 56. Foreign nationals outside of Hong Kong face prosecution under the law, Article 38. So, basically what that means, that portion means, is that if you are a journalist and you have said some things that offend the Communist Party, the Communist government, you are also liable. So, like, yeah. So if, you know, a person like myself, who is very critical of the Chinese government, cannot visit Hong Kong or not that I would never visit China, never. But it's just that this is what they're starting to do now. They're starting to, you know, if you've ever written something about the People's Republic, like, you will have problems with their government if you go into the country. That's just what's happening. They don't view journalists. Well, they don't even have real journalists over there. So it's just like there's nothing you can do. So it's worded in such a broad manner, and in that way they can make their own definitions and they can enforce their own rules. So it's really sad what's happening in Hong Kong, because they're just being subjugated. And like, it's so funny because like, so the United States is starting to reevaluate its autonomous status. So they're not going to view Hong Kong as being an autonomous city, which is like, you know, it's like, it pisses off the Chinese government that that's happening. But then they also create this law which essentially is stating that Hong Kong is now a Chinese territory, because they've always viewed it as their territory. So it's like, well, what is it, man? Like, is this an autonomous area or is it your territory? Like, what is it? You know, but it's because they realize that the trade status of Hong Kong is one of the main reasons why China gets to flourish. You know, now that's being affected. And there are several activists and resistance leaders in Hong Kong who are now just going to flee, outright flee, which they should, because, you know, now they're on the dinner menu. It's going to be, who knows what happens now. They haven't sent in the military yet, but this is like the first step towards that. So it's going to be really telling how things unfold. And, China is going to continue to test the limits of the planet. They're just going to continue to try to rule the world. This is the evil empire. I talk a lot of shit about America, but this is the evil empire. This is. So, what are we going to do? Not that I know what we can do, but what are we going to do, So, there's that. And moving onward, also slightly related with China, in North Korea, in Kaesong, North Korea blew up their joint liaison office that they used to negotiate and communicate with South Korea. They just blew it up, which is really telling. The site originally opened in 2018, and they just blew it up. And so what has been occurring is that they're getting all flustered. The North Koreans are getting flustered because their defectors, North Koreans that fled into South Korea, are sending in they're sending in propaganda. What they do is like they'll have a balloon, they'll tie it to some chip, a USB chip, and then they'll just float it in the general direction of North Korea, and then it'll pop and it'll drop. It's really funny. The smallest sign of resistance is not even like a person saying, here's what the government does, they're evil. They just put like movies. So they put like just works of art, music, movies, something, stuff that people like to listen to, like to see. And they have a real glimpse of what the outside world is because they've been brainwashed essentially. And then you watch a movie and you're looking at New York City and you're like, holy crap, like that's the outside world? What? They have everything. So yeah, the North Korean government's like they blew up this office building because they want this to stop. Like this is really just to find an excuse to raise tensions, because really, like, you're gonna start a war over this because people are putting propaganda into your country. But I mean, this is North Korea we're talking about, so they're snowflakes in their own right. So yeah, this liaison office that they blew up in Kaesong, and it's signaled a rising tensions. And they also mentioned, so I'm reading this from BBC, so they also mentioned about the Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong, and the fact that she's starting to like step up to the plate now. Because in the past, the last month or so, Kim Jong-un was just he disappeared, or like there wasn't any sign of him anywhere. And so they were saying that it's possibly his sister that's stepping up and taking control. And of course the North Korean government tried to, oh, that's not true. Here, look, he's right here. But she's still she still has the limelight. Like, she's still in the making calls. It's really interesting what's happening here. I mean, this is like a kingdom in itself. North Korea is just like any other feudal kingdom in history. Once you see it like that, then you realize, oh, okay, this is like a family business with a military on the side. So that's what's happening there. And this may also just be China directing them to like distract and like, hey, like, we're making some moves, so why don't you do something also? Yeah, it might be wrong, but China, like, you never know. They're constantly scheming, and especially now with the United States like buckling, like a boxer, like he's on his heel. So okay, just one more hit, he's down. So, but I mean, they don't want to make that hit just yet, because if they do it too soon, well then they're fucked, because they're fucked. Yeah, I mean, North Korea, the whole Korean situation, they've been at war since the 50s. So there's no peace. There's a truce, but the war hasn't ended. So yeah, I mean, there's going to be tensions always. It probably will never be fixed. And yeah, I mean, they're again, the main reason why they're doing this now is because of people using propaganda and trying to spread it within their country. So who knows? Who knows what's going to unfold there? There's so much that can happen. Like we said with the India-China situation, that could blow up tomorrow. It really could. And so could this. It's one of those areas in the planet where there is a potential for World War III. Really. So there's that happening. And I wanted to expand on different issues. So stepping away from China, but still like concerning the topic of World War III. It's just like the different factions that are forming right now. So of course we have, I don't even know if we could use the term allies, but we have the West, right? Which is the United States, which is on the fence right now, really. So the United States, you have Canada, the European Union, essentially the UK, and then their allies that they can call upon, NATO, basically. And then you have the East. So you have Russia, China, Iran, Pakistan. You have those powers. And North Korea. So right now I wanted to speak about that dynamic that's forming. And specifically I wanted to talk about a bombshell of a report that came out in the last couple of days. So it was reported that there are intelligence officials within Russia, military intelligence, that are sending money towards Taliban fighters or Taliban affiliates to essentially pay off bounties for killing U.S. soldiers. And these bounties that were being placed it's a provocation, and it certainly is a, escalation in tensions. It's really telling because, and it's almost ironic, because you have the Soviet invasion that occurred in the 80s, and that was a big, controversy with the Soviet Union, and the United States was aiding, sending money, weapons, training to the Mujahideen, which is the precursor to the Taliban. So they were sending aid and equipment to the Mujahideen so that they could fight the Soviets. And then the Mujahideen turns into the Taliban, and of course 9/11 happens, and we invade Afghanistan. It's the longest running war that we fought, and now Russia is paying the Taliban to kill our soldiers. And I was also, I think, reading somewhere that they were sending weapons over there. So, this is a interesting turn of events. They do say that Afghanistan is the graveyard of empires. So, who knows what that means for us? But yeah, this report of Russian soldiers paying bounties, or I shouldn't say Russian soldiers, Russian military intelligence paying bounties to kill American and coalition soldiers in Afghanistan. And they've also seen, they've intercepted data showing transfers from Russian military bank accounts into Taliban linked accounts. So this is happening. They are affiliated with one another. Now the question lies, how much did Donald Trump know about this? Because Donald Trump is the commander-in-chief, and he's also been accused of being an asset to Putin, which I used to think that, but I don't think it's just the case. I just think he likes having Putin's approval. But it's really telling, how much how much did he know? Because you are the commander-in-chief. You are meant to not only protect this country, but to protect our soldiers too. How is a soldier supposed to feel on the field when he's fighting the Taliban, and it's becoming revealed now that the Russians are paying the Taliban to kill them, and it's also possible that the President of the United States might have known about it and didn't do anything. He doesn't care. How are you supposed to feel when you're a ground soldier like that? When you're an officer, you take orders from this guy, and he may or may not know that people are being paid to kill your troops. It's gonna be interesting. They this should be an immediate being forced to testify like, this is grounds for impeachment almost, and they've already tried to impeach him, but this is bad, like, seriously. So who knows? Just reading from the New York Times, I should say. So Afghan officials this week described a sequence of events that dovetailed with the account of the intelligence. They said that several businessmen who transfer money through the informal Hawala system were arrested in Afghanistan over the past 6 months and were suspected of being part of a ring of middlemen who operated between Russian intelligence agency, known as GRU, and Taliban-linked militants. The businessmen were arrested in what the official described as sweeping raids in the north of Afghanistan as well as in Kabul. $500,000 were seized from the home of one of the men, added a provincial official. The New York Times had previously reported that the recovery of an unusually large amount of cash in the raid was an early piece in the puzzle that investigators put together. So, yeah, they just slowly started building up that intelligence, and, you know, the aspect to me that confirms a lot of this is the fact that they're actually, like, getting the money. So, like, you know, it's one thing to speculate, oh, they might be paying soldiers. No, they're getting the money. So, like, they were getting that money, and we can see the transfer data. So, like, this is very serious. Now, I'm surprised that this hasn't escalated into a more confrontational event. But then again, you know, we have, like, jets intercepting each other all the time, like ships are intercepting each other. It's just, so much could happen, because you look at Afghanistan and then you think, oh wow, like this stuff is also happening in around Alaska. This stuff is also happening around the UK. Like, they're everywhere and they're constantly checking them. Now, that is to say, of course, that, you know, we're in places like the Black Sea. Like, what business do we have to be there apart from monitoring our allies? I mean, but we're still, like, we're near their waters, so it's not like there are Russian jets and ships near our waters, which, I mean, there have been in the past. Not to say that there hasn't been, but, like, we're surrounding them more than they're surrounding us, is what I mean to say. So it's not like we're not innocent, or it's not like, you know, they're completely bad, because, you know, we've been doing some stuff too. But I just find it interesting about this whole bounty situation and our soldiers basically being targets and hunted down by the Taliban. Which, I mean, probably isn't as severe, because, I mean, our soldiers are doing pretty okay. But it's still, it's a war, and it's you don't want your soldiers being, you know, bounty hunted. So it's really gonna see. We're just gonna see what happens. I mean, Trump is gonna deny it, that he knew anything. But then again, you know, like, there's not, like, he's the commander in chief. Like, you didn't know about this? Come on, please. So we're gonna have to move on from that. So that was what I wanted to talk about internationally. Probably missed some things, but at the same time, you know, we'll just circle back at it. But I want to move forward more domestic issues and just talk about what's happening here, because there's just madness every day in the United States. And of course, you know, we are the global epicenter of this viral outbreak, where, you know, we're number one, USA number one. Hey, we did it, guys. So the most deaths and the most confirmed cases out of everybody. And, you know, I wanted to say something, like, I probably, like, mentioned in the past, like, oh, well, you know, if this was under Obama, like, this wouldn't have happened. And I do need to clarify, like, because I do say certain things, and I do want to, like, circle back on that. So, you know, the outbreak would have happened regardless. The outbreak would have happened. It's more of the preparedness. It's the leadership. It's, you know, the amount of equipment that's available. Like, you know, when Donald Trump was hearing about these reports in China, he didn't take the steps to prepare for anything. Under a different president, who knows? But more than likely, when they're getting those reports that there is a highly contagious viral outbreak in China that can come here, then they would have taken the steps to prepare for it. And not even that, they wouldn't have perpetuated this anti-intellectual ignorant culture of, I don't have to wear a mask, or it's just, I don't know, man. It's just a fucking mask, It's just a mask. Well, what are you losing? What are you losing? I don't know. But I will say, it does become difficult when you have police officers, harassing people over that stuff. When you get the state involved in that. So I do understand those arguments. I do understand that. But at the same time, like, if a business doesn't want people not wearing masks inside their business, they have every right to say that. They have every right to refuse service to somebody who's not following and complying. So, individually, like, it's okay if you're setting your own rules, and you still need some rules, like some legal, precedent in place, but you don't want, like, force to always be the answer, in that sense. But coronavirus is accelerating in this country, and what that is going to do is that it's going to set in another wave of lockdowns and shelter in place orders, and that's going to continue to kill businesses, because we're not nationalizing anything. We're nationalizing the stock market and these corporations, but small businesses, and this is what I mean, socialism for the rich, but fuck you for the poor, right? And it's a sad turn of events, what's happening, and it could have been avoided. It really could have been avoided. We could have done something like it. Greed wins out every day here. Greed wins, which, when greed wins, nobody wins. That's the whole thing, though, because nobody's gonna win. And living in this country, it's really eye-opening. It's because, at the same time, I love this country, but it is getting everything that it deserves, everything that it has coming for it. It's just, and it's a sad thing to say, it really is, because a lot of people are going to get hurt, a lot of people are going to die, and I'm not saying that I'm going to be the one to make it out of this, but I can at least look around and just say, hey, you know what? We had this coming, because people had their heads up their asses when it was very obvious what was going to happen. Like, I'm making these calls and I'm a nobody, but I can see it. So what does that say about everybody else, But United States, places like, primarily the more anti-intellectual, anti-science states, so Florida and Texas, Arizona, like, we're experiencing a heavy outbreak, and it's still accelerating. Now I actually know people, they haven't even had a confirmed test, which is another thing. They're starting to defund testing, so it's going to be more difficult to get those tests. What? It's just madness, man. It's just madness everywhere. But, I'm starting to see people that I know personally who are getting sick or getting affected by this. And I don't know if it is COVID. It just may just be another bug. But, what else could it be? It's not flu season. What else could it be? And it's so messed up, too, because I was around them. And I went down to, it's actually funny. I was celebrating my birthday, so I turned 24. And it was a nice perspective moment just to be like, wow, I'm 24 years old and now this shit's happening. And we'll see what happens next year. But it was unnerving, because I was letting my guard down, and these were some people that I hadn't seen since I went back up. So these are people that I hadn't seen since the lockdown. So, I was hugging people, and I'm Hispanic, so we do like a cheek kiss, which is like very, very, like, no, you shouldn't be doing that, but it's a cultural habit, and it's you want that physical touch, that affection of like, hey, like, we're buddies, or we're family. I will say that I'm not surrounded by anti-maskers, if you want to call it that. I'm not surrounded by those folks, so, like, I felt okay doing it. It was still unnerving, like, oh, this is a life or death situation. Well, not really, but it's still like severe. But it was just nice to let your guard down for once with people that you can trust. And so now I'm back up here in isolation essentially, and I'm hearing not all of them, but like a lot of people that I was just in contact with like a week before, now they're starting to feel sick. And I feel fine. And it's almost been like a week since I left. So like if I was sick, I would have felt it by now. But I feel healthy and fine. So it's like, I feel like, well, I'm still going to give it some times. But for right now, I feel like Neo, when he's dodging the bullets in slow-mo, just... But, I'm not out of the woods yet. And I'm not, this virus outbreak is still going to continue. Like, there's going to come a point where we realize, oh, wow, this is the easy time. And that's what I'm saying right now. Like, I know that this is the easy time. And not to say that I'm doing easy, but just like perspective-wise, like, okay. It's so weird being like, not necessarily, I wouldn't say I'm a pessimist, because I do look for a lot of good things and I do look for beauty and everything, but it's just like, I know when I'm looking at a bad situation, and I know when I'm looking at a situation that's getting worse, and doesn't necessarily make me like a pessimistic person. It's just like, I'm not going to trick myself into seeing something else, because it's too much to bear. Because I've seen a lot. I have dealt with a lot. And it's always helped when I looked at the situation for what it is, not for what I want it to be. Right? So I'm looking at this coronavirus outbreak. I'm looking at this environmental breakdown. I'm looking at the economic collapse. I mean, I know what a collapse looks like. And, just being an amateur historian, I wouldn't say amateur, just a student of history, somebody who, listens extensively and who has some sort of an idea about human nature and what we're willing to do. Like, I know what I'm seeing. So, people are going to tell you that things are going to be better, but that's because they have to tell you that, because they can accept it getting worse. Like, but of course, being in my stage, like, it's easier to accept because, like, I don't have much to begin with. So it's not that I have nothing to lose, but it's not going to be as far of a drop, essentially, is what I mean. So I won't be at the summit falling, endlessly, for, an hour or so, how tall the mountain is. I'll be more at the base of the mountain where, I might fall and slide down the side of the mountain and hurt myself, but it'll be easier to bear when I hit the bottom than it being at the summit, is what I mean to say. But again, everybody's going to hit the bottom. Everybody. So there's that. But yeah, so living in Texas is going to be interesting in the long term, especially with this outbreak. Like, in my town, I'm one of the few people who wears a mask still. And, this is a less populated area, so, like, things are still, they've been normal to begin with, but it's still, like, it's just, like, people still now getting all bent out of shape over masks. And now they're bringing up these arguments about oxygen level, and, it's just, people will find any excuse not to follow the rules. Like, it doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter. They're gonna find an excuse just to be against it, because you can't tell me what to do. Fuck you. You can't tell me what to do. That's what it is, really. It's that same mentality. You can't tell me what to do. So, you tell people to wear a mask, they don't wear masks. You tell people to wash their hands, they're not gonna wash their hands. Like, it's just basic. It's basic hygiene, really. It's basic hygiene. And I mean, this is just what happens when you slowly defund public education. This is what happens. You have an entire generation of mouth breathers who are just going to continue to perpetuate this infection. They're going to continue to perpetuate it. And again, there is the real case of, how far can the state go in mandating these sort of things. There's a real that's a real case. So I'm not discrediting that, but there's a point where it becomes less about the state and more about personal responsibility. And wearing a mask and doing your due diligence is about personal responsibilities. People are really going to gamble getting sick because they want to prove their point. Because they have an ego problem. Who knows? So there's that. That's what's going to happen. Yeah, Florida. Man, I saw a video about the city hall. Those folks that came to the city hall, and it is a clip out of Idiocracy. It's just the level of hysteria and fundamentalism, religious fundamentalism. You can't. God will. It's just like I don't. How are these are real people out in the streets who pay taxes, who contribute to society. These are real people. I don't know. Oh my God. Man, I was listening to Doug Stanhope, and he was talking about just about being an observant person, because he's making all these points about everything basically, and he makes this, and he says like, look, I am an idiot, like I'm fucking dumb, and I can see this, and that's exactly how I feel. I think very highly of myself. Which I don't mean to say that arrogantly, because I'm not an arrogant person most of the time. But it's just like, there's a certain degree where it's okay to think highly of yourself. But you also have to be realistic. And I know that I say idiotic stuff all the time. I know that. But I can see it. I can see, the bullshit. I can see the bullshit. So, and, I can see the bullshit, and I'm a moron, quote unquote. So what does that say about everybody else who can't see it? And, whatever station in their life they're in, but, they think that they're successful. Okay. But you can't even point out like real things that are happening. The stuff that really matters. You can't even point that out. So what does that say about you? So, I mean, yeah. I'm not even that smart, and I can see it. So it's just, who knows? But domestically, the coronavirus is going to spread, and things are going to continue to break down. What are you going to do? But again, as I was talking about, we have in this country the economic unrest, the pandemic, and now we have a brewing political movement as a result of George Floyd's death. Which, look, I think George Floyd's death is being used inappropriately. And what do I mean by that? So, when you look at some of these memorials and the iconography, they're turning him into a sort of saint, into a martyr, which, again, is a direct result of the state killing him, of him being murdered. But this is what happens, right? So somebody dies, they can no longer speak for themselves, and under mysterious circumstances, and then people jump in and they start using the image of that person for their own cause, right? I mean, look at Jesus Christ, right? He dies, and his apostles are sitting around like, well, fuck, we really got to do something about this, because this guy was really popular. Or, what I mean to say is that you have somebody dying, and then you have outsiders injecting their own agenda towards it. So, we have George Floyd. He passed, and that sparked, on top of the pandemic, on top of the economic collapse, this murder sparked the fire that we're seeing right now, this giant dumpster fire that we're seeing right now. And I mean, if it wasn't going to be George Floyd, it was going to be somebody else. We also had like another black man being killed, Elijah McClain, which was reading the circumstances for that are pretty sad. He was from what I've read, is just a gentle guy. I mean, he was playing violin playing the violin for cats at a shelter. Like, that's the kind of person that he was, and he got murdered by police. They always seem to kill the best people in our society. They always seem to kill, the people who under normal circumstances aren't gonna cause trouble. Well, why is that? Why is that? I don't know. It's a power trip. Like, what goes through your head when you're doing that? When you're hurting somebody who you don't know? You only know them off a description. And then you just kill them. Well, what does that do to a person? And then you kill them, and then you get administrative leave. Qualified immunity. So they continue to get away with it. I mean, this is what happens. When that happens for so long, you see the riots in the streets. You see police stations being burnt down. You see people not only asking to defund the police, but just to get rid of them. And I mean, like, we're all hung up about these protesters, making these ridiculous demands, but you're not paying attention to the ridiculous behavior of the police. If the police didn't behave in such a fashion, we wouldn't have this. We wouldn't. I mean, criminals are criminals. That's one thing. But the people who are being killed aren't criminals. And when a police officer goes out in the streets and treats everybody like as a criminal, well, then we have a problem. Because they're going to look for anything that they need to use that force. That's just the way it is. We've cultivated a caste of warriors who see themselves as being separate from our society. So they don't see themselves as being the protectors of society. They see themselves as police. I mean, they're behaving as though they are a gang. It's us and them. What are you going to do? So, again, the George Floyd protests have been, moving along. And, we also had an incident where you had a couple pointing guns at these protesters, and in St. Louis. And what happened, I think, from what I'm reading, I shouldn't say I think, what happened was this group of protesters, they went into a private community, and they opened this gate somehow, and they started walking through this community, and either some protesters were messing around at the house, or that couple walked out. They just started pointing guns at them. I mean, the couple I'm talking about, the St. Louis couple, the man and his wife. The man has the AR, the wife is holding that little shiny pistol, and they're just pointing it and screaming and yelling at people. It's when I see stuff like this now, like, I'm not even like shocked or, oh, this is so scary. I'm just like, yep, like, what? Yes, I'm not surprised. I'm not shocked, and I'm not surprised. But it really just shows, like, these guys are strapped. Like, if you go into these communities, people are going to come out with guns. They're going to make sure you leave. Now, in this instance, the people in the streets weren't rioters. They were just protesters. I don't know how they got into that community. So who knows how that happened, but they got in it, and it was a private community. So in some sense, they weren't breaking the law in doing that, because that's not a public area. That's a private. Yeah, and I'm not even a fan of, like, private communities and gated communities. But at the same time, like, some people just don't want to deal with others. They just want to be in their little spot. Okay, I'm just not going to go in there. There's no reason for me to go inside there. But those people, they did go inside there, and they saw what they saw, which is a very clear message of, don't come around here again. So who knows? But these are like suburbanites, these suburban boomers. They clearly didn't know how to use their weapons. Like, the husband was like sweeping his wife, and yeah, it's cringy. It's like, you have a situation like the roof Koreans, right? Where they're defending their businesses, and people, of course, applaud that. And of course, I'm That's a very iconic image from that time. But I mean, I do support people protecting their property, people protecting their businesses. It's a different thing when you're brandishing a weapon and actively trying to threaten people. But who knows? I don't think they're going to face any legal ramifications. But at the same time, like, they're still getting doxxed. Well, they literally got doxxed. I mean, the people know where they live now, but people are finding out their information, where they work, just all these sort of things, and it's just like, wow, this happens quickly. So if you say something, you do something, people are going to find out about you. So it's, yeah. And apart from the fact that, like, they were on national television swinging guns around, and now people are making memes about them. Yeah. This is going to be up there with, like, images of 2020. It's just the gun couple. Yeah. But I mean, on a real level, that's how I'm trying to be. Like, if I'm gonna have a partner, a wife, or something, like, she needs to know how to handle a weapon, and she needs to know how to handle herself. So, in some sort of ways, like, okay, I kind of have to applaud that couple, because, like, in low key, those are kind of goals. Like, yeah, but still, like, they just didn't know what they were doing. They didn't have the training. I guess they were just afraid, really. They were just probably really scared. That's mostly what it is. A lot of these people, when they act out irrationally and violently sometimes, it's because they're scared. So that may have been just it. So, yeah, the couple pointing guns at people and just BLM in general. Speaking about BLM, there was an interview with two of the organizers, and they both came out as trained Marxists. Those are their words, quote, trained Marxists. And it was kind of like a blow up, or at least with, like, right wing or, outlets, not even like mainstream media, just like, right wing talkers, which I've been starting to listen to more because it's just better to get a whole spectrum of views. Because look, I used to be like super anti-gun, or I should say pro-gun control. I was really in on that, like, because, I was a student in school, and there's mass shootings almost every week, like, and then I don't come from a gun-toting family, so naturally, I was going to be anti-gun. Then over time, I changed on that. So I've realized, after changing on guns, I have a lot more in common with so-called right-wing individuals. Because, I don't think that if you're a conservative or right-wing, that you're racist. I don't think that. If you're a racist, you're a racist. That's the thing. And you're a racist on the left as well. So, yeah, I mean, when I changed on guns, I realized, what else can I change on? What else can I look at? And so, you have them talking about, like, Black Lives Matters, and it's kind of like a vessel for Maoist uprising almost. And I don't necessarily want to think that, or I didn't think that before until these organizers came out saying that they're trained Marxists. And, look, like, talk about Karl Marx. I should read his work before I make any conclusions, but I do understand his principles: the proletariat, bourgeois, the means of production, like all those different, like, aspects and concepts. I understand. I just haven't read it in person. But I was never really a Marxist. I do defend socialism and communism, but I'm not going to defend, Pol Pot or Stalin, which is like the extreme of it. That's like, it's taking it too far. Any extremist ideology I don't agree with. And Marxism is an extremist ideology, or it has been carried out in extremist ways. A lot of people have been killed in the name of Marxism. So it's not something that should be concerning, because it could just be that they're economically, they're speaking economically, but politically I don't agree with Marxism. Not even economically either, because you can't have people mandating, we're going to make this amount to meet this demand. Like, it changes. So, like, you just gotta produce it, so even then, Economically, communism, Marxism, I don't agree with it. But politically, I don't either. I don't agree with it. Like, I would never swear allegiance to any party. That's my whole thing. Whether it be communist, I wouldn't even swear allegiance to the Democratic Party. Like, no. So it's no longer about like communism. It's just like, okay, it's absolute control, it's authority. It's it's collectivism. There's no individuality. Those aspects that I don't agree with. And so with these Black Lives Matters organizers saying that, they are trained Marxists. I mean, who knows what that really means and what they're willing to do? But it's certainly, like, it was eye-opening for me. Like, holy shit! Like, really? Like, you're openly saying this right now? So who knows? Who knows? But I am starting to see like concerning signs from the movement and also just the woke left, which I had seen before. I'd seen like glimpses of it, but like my whole thing was like, well, I mean, we're fighting for a similar cause, but now it's turning into something else. So they're actively attacking art and culture and history, and they're attacking like any statue that symbolizes the American history. They're just attacking it now. Like they're attacking a statue of Abraham Lincoln. And mind you, like, this is a weird depiction because it's supposed to be Abraham Lincoln freeing a slave, and it looks like he's petting him almost. So I get what they're saying there, but it almost seems like they're just attacking Abraham Lincoln, which, like, he's on our side, like he's the good guy, remember? So they're like straight up like attacking Abraham Lincoln. They're attacking like they attacked the statue of Ulysses S. Grant, who was the general who defeated the South. So, because he owned a slave at one point, well, he freed that slave, or he didn't have that slave forever. So it's just that those things where they're attacking depictions of Thomas Jefferson. Yeah, he owned slaves, okay. He probably did a lot worse than that. I'm not going to deny that. But he did write the Declaration of Independence. And he did set in motion our country. I mean, he did those things. He did. So, what you can't just... The history is real. Again, I don't believe in historical revisionism. So, we're just going to erase these people? And then what do we say about what do we tell our children about the history of this country? Like, oh, well, who founded this country? A bunch of racist white men. But they said all people were free. Oh, well, okay. What we need to understand is that people aren't perfect. And that you look at any historical point in you look at any point in history, and you're going to find bad shit, because we've progressed naturally. So yeah, naturally 50 years ago it was more I wouldn't say it was more acceptable, but it was more prevalent to see sexism and racism and discrimination. Not that it was condoned, but it was just there, right? So yeah, naturally 240 years ago there were slaves. And of course, people are openly talking about freedom, and they're talking about, human rights and all that. But then they have these violations of slavery, which is real. And some of these, Thomas Jefferson himself, who owned slaves, hated slavery. He detested it. I mean, you can read his writings. So, again, a lot of these slaveholders, a lot of them didn't like owning slaves. Like, a lot of them were just born into that family and realized what business they were getting into, and it's a huge burden, because you're gonna free all these slaves and lose your estate essentially. Which, I mean, some people are willing to do that, but others are. It's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to do that. So, yeah, give or take what you want there. So, of course, you have the woke left just attacking people. And again, I don't want it to sound like I'm defending, because like I'm very much, I would say I'm woke as well, but I don't see the need to attack history. I don't see the need to attack a statue. You know, again, it's a selfish desire of punching up, because these people feel like they've been punched down and now they have a moment to punch back up. So that's really what it is. And, you know, part of the reason that I like history is that it forces you to confront uncomfortable truths about our past and about human nature. Because a lot of these folks on the woke left, they try to highlight that we're all good and, you know, we're all loving inside, and not that that's not true. It's just like you're also not acknowledging the worst aspects of humanity, of our capabilities, you know. And anytime you do that, anytime you deny that, it just opens up an avenue for that behavior to perpetuate itself. Because once you deny that you have the potential for violence, and then you do violent things, because you're assuming, okay, well, those violent actions are bad, but this I'm doing is for good. But it's like, no, it's the same. It's the same. It's you're just being selfish right now. You want to inflict harm. That's what you're doing. You want to feel powerful. And yeah, I mean, a lot of these people who are doing that, they feel powerless. So they're at their breaking point, and then just, you know, right in the kisser, deck them. So yeah. So, I mean, we have, you know, it's interesting because I've been talking about white supremacy, which is real. But now that I've realized, you know, I could potentially open myself up for, you know, far left retaliation. Who knows? I mean, that's a very real thing. Like, you know, I probably said some things about Antifa defending them, and then upon closer inspection, like, oh wait, there are shifty people in this group, and this does have a shifty past. I've been doing a lot of Tim Pool. Like, I've been listening to him quite a bit, and I would suggest him for those who want a, you know, there are moments where like he says some things where it's just like, hey, like, okay, take it back a notch. But I'm like the same way too, I think. Not to say that I am Tim Pool. It's just, you know, if I want to do freelance podcasting, journalism, quote unquote journalism, I should definitely pay attention to him and how he portrays information. But then again, he's a high energy person. I'm more mellow, so I just like to release stuff when I can, apart from the other daily problems that I have in life. But yeah, so the woke left is getting riled up, and it's attacking history, attacking culture, art. They started changing Looney Tunes. Like so I'm guessing HBO is going to release like a new version of Looney Tunes, and Elmer Fudd, you probably heard of this. Elmer Fudd has been disarmed. Like, he's not using a shotgun anymore. Instead, he chases Bugs Bunny around with a scythe. Like, huh? Like, I don't know how to respond to that. That when I saw that, that's when I realized, okay, this is going too far. Which, I mean, it was already like escalating, which I should have paid more attention to. But now it's like, oh, this is like really starting to affect us. Because, you know, I like what Warner Brothers did initially. So before all this woke culture perpetuated itself, but it was, they put a disclaimer in front of the, you know, feature saying that, you know, a lot of these, you know, depictions are from, they're racial, they're stereotypical, but we're not going to revise them, because to revise them would be as though to erase that history, to say that that never happened. And so there are certain things where it's better to leave it untouched, because it becomes a historical document, a historical artifact, and you really get a glimpse into what people thought and how they perceive things, right? So I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was explaining this point, and I said, I am completely okay with bookstores selling Mein Kampf. I'm okay with it. In the past, I was like, oh, this is iffy, but now I'm okay with it because, say I wanted to learn about Hitler. I wanted to research about Hitler. What better way to research about Hitler than to read his words and to read his actual mind, essentially, of what he was writing and what he thought and what world he was trying to create, right? So, if you censor that, people can get it, they're not going to get those views. They're not going to get the authentic views of one of the most evil persons in history. And so, instead, what they're getting is, they're being told by the teacher, they're being told by these professors, but they're not actually like getting it themselves, so they can't actually, disseminate information and realize and think for themselves. And that's the whole point of free speech. If you just let people talk, right, there's a discourse, and eventually somebody's going to be like, hey, that's a really dumb idea, or hey, that's a really good idea. And it's really, the good ideas are going to rise to the top and the bad ideas are going to drop. But of course, then you need a system in place that is going to encourage the good ideas and always going to discourage the bad ideas. So, it's complicated. But, I'm all about free speech, and I'm okay with people ordering those books, reading those books, because, if you want to learn about that history and learn what to look for, absolutely. And even then, if you're the kind of person who's reading it because you actually agree with those views, okay. But everybody else understands that it's wrong. So if you try to, espouse it, then you're not going to get that far. Maybe within your own little circle, but that's, it's insignificant. It really is. It's insignificant. But again, that's my whole point. So the woke left actually wants to censor art and censor history. And that's not good. You shouldn't do that at all. But they're slowly starting to gain traction, and a lot of these media companies are starting to follow suit. I was reading somewhere where Hulu or Netflix, so they took off the Lethal Weapon episode from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia because there's a blackface scene. I don't know how true this was, but I think somewhere a Golden Girls episode, there's a scene where it wasn't even blackface. They just had mascara, or I would say mascara, just spa mask, just for the skin, a mud mask. And they took it off because it looks like blackface, but it's very clear that they're just having a spa day. So it's just what is happening? You just see somebody, a white person with blackface, not even blackface, just dark makeup on their face, oh, man. I mean, next thing you know, there are people who hate the movie Tropic Thunder because Robert Downey Jr., they're still mad at him. They're still mad at him for taking that role of blackface in Tropic Thunder, which for me is hilarious. That to me still stands as one of the funniest just characters in movie history. Just a character actor who's lost in the character, who's an Australian who plays a black man. It's just it's hilarious, but they missed the point. They missed it. They saw a white man in blackface, and they got offended. But they missed the whole point that this character is supposed to be ridiculous, and he's so. Yeah, a lot of people they're not paying attention. There's no nuance anymore. There's none of that. So that's the woke left there. Anyway, moving forward, we did have a Trump rally that I spoke about. It was originally supposed to be for Juneteenth, on June 19th, and he postponed it. I think they said for lack of attendance or something like that. I think they really they just postponed it because I realized, oh, this is Juneteenth. And I was looking on my Snap story and the Snap map, and there was a Juneteenth rally not that far off, right in the Greenwood district. That is the site of the Tulsa massacre. So, yeah, those wounds are still very fresh, and mind you, the massacre happened June 1st, May 30th, June 1st. So, like, it was basically 99 years to the day, almost. So, of course, those wounds are still very fresh, and now people are starting to talk about it for sure because it's, it's history. But it's just, I find it so funny how, like, this massacre probably wouldn't have been in the public discourse, conversation, had it not been for Watchmen. Because Watchmen, the new season, or I should say the sequel season that came out, depicted the Tulsa Race Massacre. And a lot of Americans didn't know about that massacre until they saw that show. They did not know about that. I mean, I knew about it. I just didn't I've never seen a depiction of it. Like a real depiction. So it was like, I'm sure a lot of people who saw that for the first time and realized that that really happened was just a complete shock to them. And not even 100 years ago. So, and look where we are right now. Not to say that, because they keep portraying this as a race riot or, a race thing. And I'm just like, okay, the media wants it to be about race, but the real issue here is class. And it's easier for them to talk about race than it is to talk about class. That's what it is. That's what it boils down to. And they're not going to address the real issues. They're not going to address the real problems. They're going to keep pointing to race. Oh, it's racism, clearly. Not seeing that racism is a symptom of this class inequality. Because, if people are doing well economically, what reason do they have to hate another group? It's not even that. They're being pit against each other. So you have one group in this neighborhood, essentially, who's lived here for generations. And then you have another group on the other side of town, but they're competing for the same jobs. And of course, the manager, he's not going to, tell them what it's really about, because there's one particular group I can pay cheaper than the other, but then this group, I'm not going to hire as much. So I can just tell them, hey, well, it's because of them. They're just taking your jobs when it's not even, That's what it boils down to, man. It's just, man. Divide and conquer, right? Also, moving on, with that Trump rally, that Tulsa rally that happened, it was a flop. So not even it wasn't even at half capacity, essentially. And what's being speculated is that TikTok fans or TikTok users, K-pop stans, they were trolling and they RSVP'd with no intention of showing up. And it was on a first come, first served basis. So they just, the people that were able to go in there, they just celebrated, had fun. Trump rally, not a mask in sight. I think I saw somewhere where the Trump organizers were removing social distancing stickers from the seats. These guys don't care. It's just, they're digging their own grave. At a certain point where it's just okay, this is what you were asking for. I'm just not going to be a part of this. You're going to, hopefully keep it within your social circle and not contaminate ours. That's really what it's going to have to boil down to. So, places like New York, they had the worst of it, and now they're starting to bounce back. But now Texas and Florida and Arizona, were all these red states that don't believe in science. They're going to be in for a bad ride. Again, this is just nature and survival of the fittest, survival of the smartest, basically. So we'll see. And it was funny watching Trump come back from that rally. He looked like he just had a bad night at the club. Just walking back and just it's so easy just to look at him and just be like, look at this guy, this loser. But I actually have a heart. So when I see him like that, I do feel bad. I do feel man, he just wanted to have a good time. He just wanted to feel accepted because he has so much shit on his plate, and he couldn't even get that. But I mean, like, I don't, I see him as being a really sad old man. Because I used to hate him, but I just stepped away from hate in general, because that's doesn't do good for your health, doesn't do good for the energy in your body, stress and anxiety and all that. It just doesn't help. He's not even worth the time thinking about most of the time. Like, what Trump's doing, Trump. Like, dude, you have your own life. Like, focus on that for once, or for a second. I don't know. People are losing their minds. That's what it really is. They're just losing their minds, and there's just a hysteria. There's just a hysteria in the air. But yeah, I mean, my whole point is just like, I used to hate him, not anymore. Not that I like what he does. I don't like him. It's just like I see him for who he is. He's just a very sad person. So there's just that, and he lashes out and he feels attacked all the time because people are attacking him a lot. So he's constantly defensive, but he can dish it out too. That's the thing. So that's why his supporters love him, because he stands up for himself too. So it's just like, oh, okay. But yeah, that happened there. But, even with that rally and the low turnout, it may have been sabotage from trolls, but it could also just be like there's less enthusiasm for Trump than before. But again, like, this election is still, it's like 4 months away. Like, it's not in the bag. And a lot of these people, a lot of these mainstream pundits, they're getting ahead of themselves. They're looking at these polls. Oh, recent polling shows Biden is up, using USA Today, right? Quote, President Donald Trump is falling further behind Democrat Joe Biden in the race for the White House, a new USA Today Suffolk poll finds. But the president's real opponent seems to be himself, I should say. Opposition to Trump is by far the biggest factor propelling support for Biden, including among those who are lukewarm to the presumptive Democratic nominee. Biden leads Trump by 12% points, 53 to 41. The nationwide survey shows. In a three-way ballot test, including a third-party line, Biden leads the Republican incumbent 46 to 37. Trump continues to hold a significant edge when it comes to enthusiasm among his supporters, an important factor in turning out voters. Half of Trump's backers say they are very excited about their candidate, almost double the 27% of backers who say that, right? So, so even though I did say, like, he did have a little turnout at his rally, and it does appear that he's losing support, he still certainly has more enthusiasm behind him than Biden has for himself. Because I'm not with it. I'm not with Biden. I'm just not. I'm sorry. I can't do it. Because the Democrats clearly have not done anything to earn my vote. They keep pointing out Trump. Well, Trump this and Trump that. Well, you know what? Y'all didn't learn from 2016. And this time around, you really didn't earn my vote. So why should I give it? That's really what it's boiling down to. And they're going to keep pointing to people like me for not voting. But, like, I'm going to vote, just not for your guy. And I'm not voting for Trump either. So, I mean, who am I going to vote for? Well, I mean, at this rate, like, it doesn't matter. Because, like, they're clearly not going to win. I might just write in Bernie Sanders' name. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll vote for Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Just writing his name in. I can't. Because I'm done with settling. I'm done with these backroom dealings. Like, I voted for the Democratic primary runoff here in Texas. And I was just doing a quick search on the candidates. And whichever one the DNC endorsed, I voted for the opposite person. Because the DNC can go fuck itself. I don't care about this establishment at all. I don't. And that's just me. Okay? Because they brought this on themselves. They're going to keep pointing at the little people when they're not going to do their jobs. Instead, they're just going to kowtow themselves to these corporate entities, these lobbies, these corrupt individuals. They're not going to fix anything. Joe Biden says it himself. Nothing will fundamentally change. And he's openly talking now about, like, even if the House and the Senate pass a Medicare for All bill, he's going to veto it. And you look at his, like, gun control measures and, like, I'm just not a fan. I'm not with it. Not with it. So, you know, if you asked me 4 years ago how I would feel about Trump winning again, I mean, 4 years ago, I would have panicked and just acted like the world was ending, which it is, but not because of Trump. But right now, I'm just like, I have bigger things to worry about. Like, it's still not going to get any better, but Biden's not going to fix anything. Biden is just, you know, he might, I don't know what he might do. It's just the thing, like, he's not even in control. They're just putting him in there so that you can have him, you know, read the teleprompter. My fellow Americans, this is like, there is a very clear decline in his cognitive ability. Like, you just can't deny it. Like, it's very obvious. Not to say that Trump isn't doing any better either. But, like, one of the biggest, like, arguments I heard against Bernie Sanders was because, well, he might die in office. Well, so can these guys. Like, all of these people can die. Look at the age bracket for our senators and for our leaders. They are so fucking old. They're old. So there's no new ideas being in place. It's just the same thing. And it's falling apart right in front of us. So you want me to be like, why? You clearly haven't convinced me. I don't know, man. So you heard it here. I'm not voting for Trump or Biden. I'm just going to write in a name or something. I don't know. But, like, Democrats haven't earned my vote. They haven't. I mean, Trump isn't a good enough reason because there's so much more shit to worry about. Because Trump, he only has the 2 terms. He can't do a 3rd term. He can't. I know that. We know that. So, I mean, he's probably going to die before the 2nd term is out. That's the whole thing. Like, it's not like his health is any better. I don't know, dude. There's just so much wrong going on. Our leadership has failed. They're not even in control. Like, the corporations allow them to run for office. It's like Cyberpunk 2077, which is, I cannot wait for that game to come out. I wish they keep delaying it. Like, if they had just kept it like before, like, we would have been playing it. Fuck, man. But November, right, is, I think, the new release date for Cyberpunk. But it's just the ideas of corporations, like, ruling the planet. You know, so it's just, that's basically what's happening. So, you know, we have people just, they're counting their eggs before they hatch, saying that Biden is leading now, but, like, come on, like, this is what they said about Hillary, and y'all didn't learn last time. So, you know, who knows? But the reason why that's happening is because Trump is fucking up so badly that people are just turning anywhere. So there's that. So, before I wrapped up this domestic segment, I wanted to talk about a holiday that's coming up this Saturday, which is Independence Day, 4th of July. So, I want to release this episode before that happens, because this year around, this Independence Day is going to be very different. It has a very different feel to it. It's unlike anything that I've experienced, but, like, this is not like anything any other American has experienced, like, not for a long, long time, because there's just so much that has been going wrong, and is still going wrong, and we're still a young country. That's the thing. This American experiment, is still very young. This so-called republic that we have, it's young, and it's already falling apart, and we were the beacon of hope for the whole planet, essentially. Even with our flaws, our flaws are very obvious, but the idea of America, of our justice system, everybody agrees that that's a good thing. Everybody wants that. So now we're just in limbo because it's it's slipping through our fingers. That dream, that American dream, you know, we like to think that that's what holds us together. I mean, George Carlin said it himself, they call it the American dream because you have to be asleep to believe it, right? Now, I mean, that's a funny thing to think about. It's a funny thing, he's a comedian, and it's very poignant. I still would like to believe that there's opportunities and there's hope in this country. And there is. I mean, some people, I complain about my position in life, but there are people who have been worse off than me and they've made something out of themselves. So a lot of it is a me thing, or I should say, a lot of it is a you thing, right? At the same time, it also just speaks to the length of work that you have to do, because it's not that I'm opposed to work. Again, it's just I'm opposed to bullshit work. Like, if I'm doing stuff and I just know that this is bullshit and I'm not gonna get anything out of it, maybe a paycheck, okay, but like, I didn't do anything, and I just wasted my time for payment. This is a waste of time and energy. I could have been doing something else, right? So there's just that. I mean, in this country, there's just a lot of bullshit work that you have to do in order to get by, in order to make ends meet. And it just eats you alive. It just eats you alive. Like schoolwork, it's a lot of bullshit work. That's just like, why do I have to do this? Okay, for a grade. Okay, but this is still bullshit. Like, why am I doing this? The only incentive that you're giving me is, not purpose. It's just, do you want to fail? No, then do it. Okay, but that's not really a motivation. That's more like a threat, really. So there's just that. But this country, right? 4th of July, I'm going to stay here in my local area in Huntsville. I would have gone down to see some more family, but we have the coronavirus outbreak spreading, and also just like, why would anybody want to go to a public space right now? It's just the worst idea. Not even because of coronavirus. It's just, this climate is just not. You don't want to be outside right now. Just stay home. Maybe it's because I'm an introvert and I just like staying home in general. But like, there's just a lot of people who have to go out to a club. They have to go out to a bar. Like, they have to go out and waste money and then record themselves wasting money so that they can be more attractive or, socially accepted. Hey, we like having a good time. Hey, we're fun. We're not buzzkills. It's just emptiness. Because it's not. You don't have to do any of that. You don't have to do any of that. But hey, I'm the loser who is going to survive this pandemic in his apartment. Right? Okay. Well, moving onward. That's the domestic scene. Independence Day is coming up. I'm not saying you can't celebrate it, because it's definitely a good time to be with family and just hanging out. It's just, just being safe and being mindful of your surroundings. Have a barbecue, drink some beer. I'm not saying you can't celebrate this country's history, because I am proud to be American. I do love this country. I'm very hard on it because we can do better and we're not doing better, but we absolutely can. So there's that. So that wraps up my domestic segment that I like to talk about. A little piece of earth that we have. And now I'll dive into the more natural events. And lately there's been some weird stuff going on. So being in Texas right now, we're experiencing a dust storm, or it's not that this happens usually. This is a very unique situation that's occurring. One thing I should say is that when I was growing up in school or in St. Croix, we would experience it. We would experience dust storms and have to deal with that. And it was, not at this level that we're seeing where like the sun is getting blotted out, but you would still see dust on your windows. It would be pretty weird. So today, right, we had, or I shouldn't say today, but we just in Texas, we've been having this dust storm break out, and like it's completely almost blotted out the sun. Like it's really strange. I think now it's starting to let up, but we still have the dust in the air. We still have it, and it's interesting. In some ways, I'm not opposed to it because it's actually like keeping the sunlight down, so it's not so hot out as usual. So I welcome that. Now I can actually like go about my business and not like sweat the minute I get to my car. But it's just strange. It really is strange. I don't know if it's affecting my like breathing or anything. I feel fine, but then again, it's dust. It's microdust. There is an interesting development considering that this dust is coming from the Sahara, and it's affecting essentially our hurricane activity. So it's going to suppress hurricane activity, and basically all that dust is really just dry, warm air, and hurricanes need humid air. So you have that warm air moving in, which is going to suppress hurricane activity, potential for hurricane activity. Also, the sun's getting blotted out, so there's not as much surface heat on the ocean. So for the time being, at least maybe for another week or so, there's going to be a decrease in activity hurricane-wise, which is good because like this is going to be a very, very active one. It's still something to keep an eye on, different storms, but it has the potential to get serious and destructive. So there's that. So we have the dust storm that's happening, and which is affecting global temperatures. But then another event that is underway, which is La Nina. So in the Pacific region, we have this weather event, El Nino or La Nina, that occurs, and that usually is a sign for global trends. So La Nina is going to bring about warmer weather. They're saying extreme heat. They're doing forecasts on areas like the Midwest, and they're going to experience heat, and it's going to affect the farming there. They show like another just infographic of like soil temperatures and how those regions are going to be affected by extreme heat, and soil temperatures are going to affect crop yields. All different. It's a lot of science, right? But it just goes to show like this is going to be a very hot year. It's going to be, naturally every year it's going to get hotter. Like every year just magically keeps breaking the new heat records. Whoa, wow, really? Oh. So La Nina is going to happen, or it is happening, who knows? And it's going to bring about some heat there. And also speaking on extreme heat conditions, we've had in Puerto Rico, like severe drought conditions, and they're being declared into a state of emergency. Like Puerto Rico is just it's for me, it has a closer place in my heart because I've lived in the Caribbean. I've lived in the Virgin Islands, which were like not even like 10 miles off the coast of the island. So like I visited Puerto Rico pretty heavily, and for all intents and purposes, I might be Puerto Rican myself, just being Dominican ethnically. So we're neighbors. These are my people essentially. So seeing what they've had to deal with, we've had hurricanes, we've had earthquakes. They have massive corruption. Like people forget like the Puerto Rican people kicked out their governor, so they had a uprising, a straight up uprising in Puerto Rico, and now we're experiencing these drought conditions in the island, and so they're rationing. They're it's wow. So reading from the weather.com, concerns about water shortages from a rapidly growing drought in Puerto Rico have prompted Governor Wanda Vasquez to issue a state of emergency. Nearly 60% of Puerto Rico is in drought on June 23rd, according to the U.S. Drought Monitor. Severe drought, the second worst category, was affecting about 26% of the U.S. territory. The drought is widespread in much of eastern and southern parts of Puerto Rico, including San Juan and Ponce. Just over a month ago, on May 12th, there were no areas in Puerto Rico classified in drought, but a few spots were abnormally dry. Okay, and the drought has grown because rainfall deficits in parts of the U.S. territory are running 4 to 8 inches below average over the past 30 days. The Drought Monitor report said dry air associated with bursts of Saharan dust moving across the Caribbean have squelched any widespread rain chances recently, but there have been some hit or miss storms. Water rationing will begin on Thursday for about 1,400,000 homes and businesses. According to the Associated Press, the rationing will cut off water to those customers for 24 hours every other day, right? So this extreme drought conditions are linked with the Saharan dust storms that are occurring. And yeah, I mean, it's just shifting weather events and shifting the climate in certain regions. And they're rationing water in Puerto Rico, and like, it's just another thing for them that they have to deal with. And as I said, right now, because the United States empire is collapsing and imploding, regions like Puerto Rico are going to start to break off. They're going to start to, like, because they're trying to be a state, right? But they're not really getting much progress in that regard. Like, a lot of Republicans are going to resist that, and plenty of Democrats too will resist that. So there's going to be a point where if the island can't become a state in the country, they're just going to start demanding to be their own country. Like, and, you know, not that they could pull it off, but like, you're just going to see it. And I mean, there are Boricua nationalists and secessionists that want to create their own country. So it's there. And, you know, these conditions like this where people aren't getting the help that they need, they can't take it, and they're going to start running their own show. And I mean, you know, again, you know, if you can't step to the plate to provide for your citizens, and what obligation do those citizens have to you, right? So if the Puerto Ricans want to create their own island nation because they're not getting any help from the government, from the federal government, then so be it. Like, I'm not going to be opposed to it. So, who knows? But Puerto Rico is just another area that's being affected by this outbreak, or not outbreak, I should say, just the changing climate, I should say, because what they've shown with this dust storm is that it has very much to do with shifting jet streams and just the wind patterns, and it has everything to do with the ocean temperatures and all that. It's all connected, really. So there's that. So I wanted to circle back, because I talk about China a lot, but I wanted to circle back real quick with China about specifically infrastructure. I wouldn't say calamity, but it's just linked infrastructure wise about the Three Gorges Dam in China, and in general just the region. I think it's on the Yangtze River that is experiencing abnormal amounts of rain. So they're experiencing massive rain. In fact, I was watching videos of a town just getting flooded, just being washed away almost. And literally people being washed away in the floodwaters. So I probably just watched a couple people dying in the floodwaters. But it's scary. When I watch, like, it's scary to watch water move like that, because it's so swift, right? And you think to yourself, well, I mean, it's just water, you can swim through that. But then you see like a car just being basically like ripped apart, because that's how quick the water is moving, and that's how like dense it is. It's just, oh my God, like, you know, you could have like a stream that is not even maybe like 6 inches depth wise, but just moving fast, you know, and that could sweep you off your feet. That really could. So like, when you see a torrent of water, it's very scary. And so watching those videos, it's just like, wow, like yeah. But these areas, these parts of China are getting flooded out. And, the Yangtze River, the Yellow River, a lot of them, they do experience like historic levels of flood. Like, there was a flood actually like some years ago, and it killed like almost 1 million people. Let me see here if I can find it. So, oh yeah, okay. So 1938 Yellow River flood, and estimated deaths 893,000. So, and property damage about almost 4 million refugees. Like this, like it's, I was kind of speechless when I first read that, but reading it again is still like kind of a shock to think 800,000 people drowned to death. Like that is some scary shit, and that can happen again. That can happen now again. And what is occurring is that this dam, the Three Gorges Dam, which is the largest dam in the world, is starting to experience structural failures. Now, given that this is a dam created by the Chinese government, naturally they cut corners, and so their rebar, their concrete wasn't up to par. And I was reading this report actually about what they were doing. They were releasing stuff about their dam. They're saying, oh, this can handle a 10,000 year flood. And then they changed it and it was a 1,000 year flood. And they changed it again, a 100 year flood. So it's just like they kept pulling back the qualifications. They brought in international observers to, inspect the site. And of course, the observers, they said like there's a lot that needs to be done here. And then the Chinese were claiming racial discrimination. So like you called in foreign advisors, and when they told you that you cut corners, you called them racist. Like, like, because they don't want to accept responsibility. Like, this is not a government or administration that could admit when they fucked up. Because if they admit they fucked up on this, well, what else did you fuck up on, right? Same thing with Hong Kong, right? You can't have Hong Kong asserting themselves, because then other parts of China are going to start asserting themselves, and that's how the whole government falls apart. It's a house of cards, really. But this Three Gorges Dam, they had inspectors come in and look at it, and they said that this wasn't up to par, and they got called racist. And the government was also like reclassifying the flood, like, oh, this is a 10,000 year, no, this is 100,000, or yeah. And now, I mean, there's some satellite images that show like when the dam was opened. So I think 2006 they opened it, and then they flash forward like 8 years, and already you're seeing like different parts of it like starting to like shift because of the pressure from the lake behind it that is holding back. So like it's already starting to deform, not even like 10 years later. And then you look at it today and it's worse. Like it's very, very deformed. And I think like the site is closed from visitors. So like that's how dangerous it is. And now the government's like being forced to like acknowledge that they're discharging flood waters from it. So they're flooding people downstream because the dam can't hold back the floods that are occurring upriver. I mean, this is just a disaster waiting to happen. In the same level as that Yellow River that I just talked about, just thousands of people, almost 1 million people dead. Like that is a disaster. And that happened 80 years ago. It's crazy. It's crazy. Absolutely insane. There always seems to be like some major disaster in Asia, natural disaster, where like thousands of almost 1 million people get killed, and it's just like, what? Like how does anybody come back from that? I don't know. That's crazy. So there's that. Now I've been speaking about weather changes, weather events, and I was talking about if you had listened to earlier episodes where I talked about a locust swarm that has a locust swarm that has taken over in Africa and parts of Asia. And, my whole thing with that is just like, that is like literally apocalyptic, where you have swarms of insects just eating everything that's green and all vegetation, and then they just move into a different part. I mean, like, because you look at some of these images after the swarms hit, and it's just dead. There's just death everywhere. Like, there's just branches. There's no green anything. Like, it's, wow. So, those locust swarms have been growing in Africa and Asia. And now it's being reported that in South America, in Brazil and Argentina, there is a large swarm of insects or locusts that have been eating crops, right? So the insects, right, they're in Brazil, Paraguay, they're in Argentina, just in South America, they're starting to grow. At least they travel distances of 93 miles a day, just eating swarms and locusts. And it's crazy. It's just crazy. Now we have it here, or I shouldn't say we, but like, it's in South America. And my worry is that it'll be a long travel, but they could do it. They could go from Argentina and Paraguay and Brazil and just keep moving. They could just keep moving. They're flying, right? And there's a whole swarm of them, billions of them sometimes. So they could move from South America into North America and then affect us here. They really could. So this is just really like, it's just crazy. You watch it, it's just like, oh, it's creepy. So let's see here. So the swarm is currently in Corrientes province, and the authorities there said that they had managed to reduce its size through fumigation. Corrientes borders Brazil and Uruguay, and both countries are monitoring the swarm's movement closely. A cold weather front has made the locusts lethargic, so they have moved little in the past days, officials from Argentina's food safety body, SENASA, said. So, from what that's showing is that these locusts, they're affected by the weather. In that region, it is winter time. So, that is a good sign, at least. But my whole point is that it can happen here, and these things can move. So it's just a thing to keep an eye on. Again, this is like the 7 plagues, right? Our Exodus with Moses, and just sending locusts to eat everything, which is, it's crazy. It's creepy and crazy. But what are you gonna do, right? So, with that being said, there's the locust swarm that's occurring, and if that does come here, that'll be something to cover. So there's that. And before I wrap up this natural segment, I wanted to talk about like certain things that I've been doing, just different activities that I've taken up on. And lately I've been learning to, or I shouldn't say learning, I've been attempting to hunt for hogs. Feral hogs in Texas are a very real issue, and I figured that I might as well start learning to hunt now. And by the way, I've always wanted to learn how to hunt. It's just I've never really been around hunters. So I figured, I got my rifle and I can just go out into the woods. There's woods right there, right? I'm right next to a whole bunch of national forests. And in Texas, there's no rules on hunting hogs. Like, you go out there and kill them, good job. Thank you for your service. Like, it's very serious. It's very serious out here, and it's not because I like killing at all. It's just, it's a skill, it's an adventure, it's a bit of, thrill seeking, right? It's fun. I have fun going out into the woods, and even if I don't find a hog, at least I'm surrounded by nature, and at least I'm, it's kind of cool to like almost get lost and then find your way back to your vehicle or the road that you were on. Like, oh, I'm right at the same spot. Like, just today, actually, I was just walking through the woods. I do need to get like scent killer. I think that's my main thing, is scent, because like I walk up on these hogs pretty close, like, and there was an instance where like I just sat down and already I hear like just I can't mimic the sound. They do like a little like grunt sound, and it was like right next to me, like past the thicket, but like right next to me. And of course I try to sneak up on them, but then they smell me. I think that's what it is. They smell me. But this is gonna be fun. At least it's something that I've wanted to do ever since I came to Texas. Once I realized what this is or what it was about, like I just had a deep interest in it. Plus, like, if you're gonna train for the apocalypse, hog hunting is the way to go, because not only do you have to like put on all this gear, like you also need some sort of protective equipment too. Like you can't just go in there looking for hogs. Like you gotta have some armor of some sense, or at least I think, because I see some of these videos and they fuck people up. Like they got some big tusks, so I don't want that, hitting my ribs or anything, hitting a vital. So it's better for me. Hopefully wearing some sort of vest and leg protection. But it's that sort of thinking and that mentality, that survivor mentality, that hunter mentality that I'm trying to hone. I might as well do the trial and error right now when things are easy and good, rather than when I actually have to hunt for a meal, So there's that. And, and even if I'm wrong, even if things do turn out okay, like, I'm helping, like this isn't about like killing, this is more just about preserving our natural environment here, because these hogs have no predators except for us. And like, you like literally like you step off the beaten path and not even like 10 feet, you're already seeing like where they root, and you're already seeing the wallows. So like they do a lot of damage, and it's very interesting. If you treat it's very much like a war. That's how we're starting to treat it now. It's just like it's crazy. It's crazy. So we'll see about that. I just need to get a hog, because I have like this permit where you could sell to a company. So I just got to get a hog and then see what happens there. Maybe I'll turn into a professional hog hunter. I mean, that's going to be in demand. Why not? I don't know. I'm just trying different things and seeing what sticks. And this is something that I've always wanted to do. And it's a new challenge. It's something that I can work on. Same thing with podcasting, because I'm not perfect at this. There's still a lot that I can learn from it. But you just got to do it, right? You just got to do it. And you got to like it. So I like doing podcasting, and now I'm starting to like hunting. I got to get more shape for it. But apart from that, I like it. And I want to keep doing it. So that's the natural segment that I was talking on. And, if I have interesting stories for my hog hunting adventures, then I'll include those in there. Because basically, like, I can do it every day. From where I'm sitting, I can do it literally every day. So there's that. So before I wrap up this show, I wanted to talk about a controversy, a piece that is dear to a lot of people, particularly gamers, concerning The Last of Us Part 2. So that game came out recently, and it has split people down the middle, because some people are saying that this is a masterpiece. Others are calling this a piece of garbage. It's, what I think this is, because The Last of Us, right? The first game is a masterpiece. That first game is a real masterpiece. And I don't have a PlayStation, but it's one of those games where like you don't necessarily have to play it. You just watch it. You can just watch it because it's a movie, and it's so good. It's so good. Like I still get goosebumps watching it. It's just so good, and it's a beautiful story in a dark world, a hopeless world, about redemption, and also just about the relationship between two people, almost a parental father-daughter relationship. Very wholesome. It's I don't know. I can go on and on about the game, but I want to talk more about the sequel that's come out, and you know, I feel that things would have been different if the story didn't get leaked. If it didn't, um, you know, if people could just experience it for what it was instead of being told what it was, because there is a reactionary element where they get the details and they're like, oh, I can't believe this, you know, and they're judging the game off of leaks that haven't really been confirmed or denied. So it's just like, these are just leaks. Like, you know, we're just gonna have to watch the game as it comes out, and then the game comes out and people either hated it more or they got better context for it. And you know, I don't want to turn this into a spoiler talk, but then again, you know, it's just, at this rate, like, if you don't know what's happening in the game, like, I don't know what to do for you, right? So I will say this, and big spoilers for those who haven't played through it, although it does happen like very early on. I will say that the death of Joel could have been handled better, but I do think that Joel needed to die in order to set off that course of events. Like, the whole story, right? Because a lot of people, they think that it's just a cliche revenge tale, which it kind of is, but like, you can do a revenge tale in good. Like, that, just because it's a revenge story doesn't mean that it's bad, because you can still do that in a good way. You know, just the way that they handle it, and the way they went about introducing the character Abby, and how she just went about just straight up torturing and murdering Joel. Like, of course people are going to hate her, and it doesn't really matter how well you contextualize her, how well you try to humanize her. Like, people are just going to remember that she murdered Joel with a golf club. And I don't know, man. But then, you know, I would say this much, like, what would you do if you found the person who killed your father, right? And, you know, this is a person who, they probably didn't do the best job portraying it, but like this is a person who's been consumed with revenge, whose only purpose has been revenge and to get back at her father's killer, right? So, yeah, naturally, she's gonna take it too far. But then they try to humanize her and they try to make her likable, which didn't go well because they didn't get all the contextualization before she murdered Joel. They just got the murder of Joel, and then everything else after the fact is like trying to cover up for it. It's just like, no, like, she's a terrible person. And even then, you know, like, you could still have like an anti-hero character. You know, you can still have a character that nobody likes, but it's still fun to play, you know? So there's that. I don't know. This isn't really necessarily like a talk show for games, but I mean, I just brought this up because The Last of Us Part 2 is like, apart from Cyberpunk that I just mentioned, was like the most anticipated game of the year. And now it's not a flop because it still made money, but it's just sad to see such a dedicated fan base like get divided and turn against each other. And, you know, I look at the actors like Troy Baker and all the other actors, and they're just like, they made this game that they have these characters that they love, and they wanted to make the best thing out of it, and it's dividing people. And I think this is also has to do with you know, tying it in with just our general culture war that's occurring, is because, you know, there's a lot of people who are claiming, oh, with the SJWs, they've infected the game and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, then of course you have the other people on the other side that are saying, well, people are hating on this game because there's trans characters and blah, 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 blah. It's just, everybody's just making their own shit up, you know, because they're just trying to find an excuse to hate on each other. And it tarnishes the game because, you know, I've seen gameplay. I've seen like all the cutscenes. I haven't played it, but I know how the story goes, right? And yeah, I mean, there are moments where I'm just like, what? Like, are you really? But there are other moments where it works, where there are some things that work, where, you know, and, you know, everybody tries to cast the whole game as a piece of trash. Like, no, there's some really intense moments. There's some exciting moments and fun moments. But then the filler, I think that's where people are like, because there's too much filler. That's my whole thing. There's too much filler. And also they try to focus heavily on Abby. I don't think they did the best job portraying her. Or, you know, they did what they could, really. But it's just, yeah. It's just division, right? It's a culture war, right? That's why people are at each other's throats, essentially. Yeah. So, The Last of Us Part 2, you know, a lot of it is, you know, having to do with the fact with our current climate, like we're literally on the verge of being a part of that game. So that might be just why it's captured the moment right now. But yeah, good game being, or I mean, it's a sequel, so of course the sequel is never going to be as good as the original game. And who knows, maybe this is like, you know, the Empire Strikes Back kind of deal where like you get the second movie and it's just like, whoa, like really? Like that's how it's going to stop? So who knows if they release a part 3 and how they tell Ellie's story, and hopefully they do it right, you know, but we're just going to have to see. You know, maybe there will never be a part 3 because things will fall apart. Who knows? I will say this much. I feel that the backlash wouldn't have been as severe if they didn't copyright strike as heavily as they did. You know, it's like the Streisand effect, right? Like, you know, you try to censor something, try to make people not see it, and then they want to see it more. So you copyright strike people for not even like revealing the leaks, just talking about that there have been leaks, right? So going that far really just shows like to other people that you're not really secure in this, and they're gonna latch onto that. So it was you know, part of it was on their response to the leaks, but at the same time, like, you know, they're leaks, so I mean they're not supposed to happen. So I mean they're gonna do something, right? But they just took it too far. It's just mismanagement in general. You know, I don't want to talk at length about this game for too long, but it's just interesting to see how this is all unfolded. Because I'll say this much, like, I don't hate the game entirely. I don't hate the game like other people are trying to point it out. Like, there's some things that I like about it. It's just, I wish it would have been done better. It should have been done better. Because, you know, most of the time, like, I like the concept of a story, but then when you carry it, it's how it's been carried out. You know, you have a nuanced tale about revenge and the cycle of violence and human nature. Okay, we can do that. Because, I mean, those are real things to tell. You know, you definitely want to, when you're talking about revenge, you certainly want to talk about how it's pointless. You're going to lose more that you gain. You know, and that's what we got at the end. I mean, Ellie lost everything because she kept pursuing revenge, and then she didn't even kill Abby in the end. You know, whether or not she should have killed Abby, I mean, that's up to you, really. You know, maybe in time, when all this dust settles down and a more nuanced look can really examine it. You know, again, I'm sure that the majority. In fact, I think the main reason why people are upset about this is because of how Joel was killed. You know, if that had been done correctly, you know, properly, then everything else after the game probably would have worked. But because of this crucial scene, everything else falls apart. This crucial moment in the game. So that just really tells like how the level of game making and just storytelling, like how precise it has to be. It has to be very precise, especially with such beloved characters as these, right? So yeah, all this over a video game. So that is this episode 15, that I wanted to talk about. again, just hoping that everybody's doing well for themselves and, looking on the bright side, taking care of your health, your mental health, and checking in on your family from a safe distance. Again, all of this will come to pass eventually, and we just gotta adapt and grow and just persevere, right? Survive. But right now things are okay, so there's nothing much to worry about. So this is Gabriel, and for those who are still tuned in at this rate, you will find my Twitter at Collapse Talk Pod. I also have a Patreon, Collapse Talk, and my personal email is collapsetalkpod@outlook.com. That's also the same handle that I use for my PayPal. Again, I only put this aspect in if you think my work is worthy and if you want to support this, because I definitely want to make this more long term. But again, I have to earn it, right? So there's that. Thank you for tuning in. Hope everybody else is safe and healthy. Stay out of trouble. Happy Independence Day, and thank you for tuning in.
It's the end of days, end of time. My oh my, in a blaze. You can't hide. Why oh why are the kids afraid? Mama cries. God packed his bags and said bye bye. God packed her bags and said bye bye.
Before it's all said and done, I'ma spend this money. Before it's all said and done, I'ma fuck these hoes. And I ain't pulling out shit but the chopper though. I end the week like Domingo and Sabado. No petty shit when you can see it's bigger problems, bro. But I'm a nigga, I kill you, you know how it go. Nonchalant on most occasions, apocalypse no different. It take a lot to phase them, take even more to kill them. I watch but I don't listen, a ox I'm pulling wagons. My mama birthed a nigga with the spirit of a dragon. On the last day of the calendar, I live like an assassin. I'ma pray before we go down with the planet. Drink some, smoke some, fuck some, young. Before it's all done, tell one you love one. Drink some, smoke some, fuck some. Before it's all done, tell one you love one.
When I make it to the heavens, what's the code? Do I call the phone? Security at the gate, no +1. Come all alone to race of life. I took a jog along the coast. I'm trying to cope, I raise a toast and we consulted with the Most High. Told me watch my back, front, both sides. Hit a few baddies you never smashed, for y'all both die. Let the smoke rise, take the bodies to the crypts. And when the poor people run out of food, they can eat the rich. Plead the 4/5, drop one. Zombies on the block, see I come with a shot like Siakam, my pop. I got this Glock from my pops, it make the parking lot stop. We on the clock and time clock ticking. Have you forgotten that
it's the end of days, end of time. My oh my, in a blaze. You can't hide. Why oh why are the kids afraid? Mama cries. God packed his bags and said bye bye. God packed her bags and said bye bye.
Why? It's been like apocalypse since I was on the teat. Making work for Satan, how he preyed upon the meek. Ask too many questions, do you work for the police? They took Brother Nipsey, what a pity for the streets. Work won't give me stress, that's why I chief upon my tree. Disconnected from the system like a weed. Niggas out in Paris, tell them right, they tell me read. Fuck with any kinfolk, you gon' have to get through weed.
Live life in cycles. Been here before, watched the sunrise, beating the art of war. I was torn between the truth of what can save me. What is bravery? We need better defense. Who is my safety in the field with people kill family to make a play? I had 26 years on earth. I made a way from the other side, from where they popping willies to the sun go down. It's always love when I come around. It's not for nothing seen it coming since the ultrasound. A man of the cloth, cold criminal minded carpet on the move. Umbilical cut, force fed, all of the rules, paid all of the dues. I need the receipts, I need the
feeling
recruit.
like the Lord left the room. Dead bodies rising from the tomb. Damn Daniel, as we finna meet our MF doom. Mask on, mask off, face the future like high noon. The news keep on saying we'll die soon. So sit back and roll up the my tunes. And if I'm gone before the end of the song, just tell my mom I ain't get rich yet, but I try to. Shit, I need a new planet to fly to.
It's the end of days, end of time. My oh my, in a blaze. You can't hide. Why oh why are the kids afraid? Mama cries. God packed his bag.
scared to go to sleep.